welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going to wrestle with something, well, fundamental. It's this idea of absolute, unrestricted divine power. I mean, if you've spent any time with the Quran, you see this phrase constantly. It appears over 30 times.
That's right. In Allah ala kulli shayin qadir.
Which means, indeed, Allah is over all things competent, or, most capable. It's this massive claim of unlimited omnipotence.
It is a huge claim.
But that claim immediately runs into a very human and very logical challenge for a lot of people. Skeptics call it the amputee argument, or sometimes the salamander paradox.
Right. The logic is simple.
Deceptively simple. If God can do everything, why doesn't a lost hand just grow back? Or a damaged organ, or even, hair loss? We see regeneration in nature, salamanders, starfish.
Even human children can sometimes regrow fingertips. The mechanism is clearly there in creation.
So why the hard stop for us?
And that is the perfect way to frame it. Because this isn't a contradiction. The mission for you, our listener, is to understand that this isn't about a flaw in God's capability, but about a core feature of this universe. We're going to unpack how classical Islamic scholarship, specifically the Ash'ari and Maturidi schools, handles this. They make a really profound distinction between absolute ability, or qudra, and divine wisdom, hikmah.
So the problem isn't power, it's our expectation of how that power should be used.
Exactly. The expectation of constant, visible intervention.
Okay, so let's dive right in. Let's isolate those two ideas, qudra and hikmah. If we start with qudra, absolute power, how do the sources establish that, a limb not regrowing isn't a failure of power?
Well, the sources go right to the ultimate proof. Creation itself. The argument is pretty straightforward. If Allah created a complex human hand from nothing,
from dust or a drop of fluid,
yes, with all its bones, nerves, blood vessels, then simply regenerating a part of it is logically so much easier. The texts bring this up again and again when challenging skeptics of the resurrection.
So if the first creation, the harder one, was possible,
then regeneration is trivial in comparison. The absolute capability is proven by the simple fact that we exist at all. The only limitation is in his will, his choice, not his capacity.
That's a very clean resolution. It just takes inability completely off the table. But then, of course, that forces the next question, why choose not to?
And that's where hikmah, or divine wisdom, comes in. God's power is boundless, yes, but it's exercised according to a plan that requires stability. And in this plan, He has chosen not to make constant instant regeneration our normal reality. He established what we call the laws of nature.
And these laws, gravity, aging, death, and yes, the failure to regrow a limb, this is what the classical scholars call the divine custom, right?
That's it exactly. They use terms like sunakaniya or ada Allah, the customary way of God. This divine custom gives us a stable reality built on cause and effect. I mean, think about it. If these laws were always being violated,
it would be chaos. Fire wouldn't burn consistently, gravity might switch off, the world would be unusable.
Precisely. The Ash'ari and Maturidi scholars argue that God customarily respects this habit of nature. If he performed an obvious routine miracle, a qawariq al-ada, it would break the very conditions he set for life.
So the non-regrowth is evidence of a choice, a deliberate choice.
A choice designed to fulfill the purpose of this life. And that purpose is testing.
Okay, so that leads us right into the core reason for these limits. This world, this existence, is fundamentally defined by its imperfection.
It is. It's temporary. It's the abode of testing, Dar al-Imtihan. It is incomplete by design, so that we have the free will to choose belief, to choose virtue, even when it's hard.
Because if the world were perfect, if every illness was cured instantly, if we never aged, faith would be pointless, wouldn't it?
It would be meaningless. There'd be no effort, no real choice. It wouldn't be a test. It would just be paradise on earth. And the whole point is that this isn't paradise.
The reward comes later.
Exactly. The core of faith is iman bil-ghaibi, belief in the unseen. If God was constantly intervening in obvious ways, his existence wouldn't be a matter of faith anymore. It would just be a scientific fact, like gravity. The trial would be over before it began.
And the Quran says as much, right?
It asks that very question. Do the people think that they will be left to say, we believe, and they will not be tried?
The loss, the suffering, the limitation, that is the trial. The challenge is to keep believing in the Creator's goodness, despite the limit that he's placed on your physical body.
Let's go deeper into that suffering. Because a physical loss, a permanent disability, that's one of the hardest trials. How is that hardship reframed as a tool for spiritual growth.
They're seen as divinely purposed tools. They're meant to cultivate virtues that are, almost impossible to develop when everything is easy.
Yeah.
And the main one is patience. Savor.
Which isn't just waiting around. No, not at all. It's active steadfastness. It's maintaining your devotion and hope even when you're facing a permanent loss. It reminds you of your own fragility, your reliance on the divine tawakkul. It forces a kind of humility.
So in a way, the physical loss becomes a kind of spiritual transaction. You trade immediate comfort for a potential gain in the hereafter.
Precisely. The Hadith literature is crystal clear on this. The Prophet taught that no fatigue, no disease, no sorrow hits a Muslim without Allah using it to erase some of his sins. The lack of regeneration, the suffering that comes with it, is immediately balanced by spiritual compensation.
So the physical loss is actually a form of spiritual purification.
Yes. And we have that powerful story of the epileptic companion which illustrates this perfectly. She came to the Prophet for a cure.
But he offered her a choice, a really stark choice.
He did. He said, "If you wish, be patient and you will have paradise. Or if you wish, I will ask Allah to cure you." Immediate physical relief or an eternal spiritual reward.
And she chose patience.
She chose patience. She just asked him to pray that she wouldn't be exposed during her seizures. She chose the spiritual reward over the physical cure. It's the perfect example of this theology in practice.
That's an incredible story. Okay, let's bring this into the modern day. How do contemporary scholars, people like Nouman Ali Khan or Yasir Qadhi, deal with the salamander argument from a scientific viewpoint?
Well, they meet it head on. They actually agree with the premise. The fact that salamanders can regenerate, that our own livers can partially regrow, that proves the capability is already built into God's creation. It proves the Qudra.
So the science actually supports the theological argument.
It does. They argue that God simply placed a kind of biological off switch for complex regeneration in adult humans. It's not an oversight. It's a design feature for the test of Dar al-Imtihan.
So the scientific limitation itself is proof of the divine plan, because it shows the ability is there, but deliberately held back.
Precisely. And this ties into the active role that's demanded of us. The traditions also say that Allah hasn't sent down a disease without also sending down its cure.
The hidden cure perspective.
Yes. Modern scholars see this as a command. God wants us to use the intellect. He gave us to find the means. We're not meant to just wait for a miracle. We're meant to pursue regenerative medicine, stem cell research. To find the cure he already placed in the natural order.
That completely flips the skeptic's objection. It's not, why doesn't God fix it? It's, why haven't we done the work to find the fix he provided?
Exactly. It becomes a collective test for humanity. And think about the social side of this. Disabilities, injuries, they test the whole community. They foster compassion, charity. They drive medical advancements in things like prosthetics and therapy.
If we all just regenerated instantly, we might lose the incentive for that kind of empathy and ingenuity.
Very well might. And it reinforces the idea that a person's worth is in their piety, their taqwa, not their physical perfection. The body is just temporary.
Which brings us to the ultimate resolution of the whole thing, the promise of perfect restoration in the hereafter.
That is the final answer. The loss in this life is finite. The reward is eternal. The promise is that in paradise, Jana, believers get flawless, perfect bodies, no aging, no illness, no loss.
And the Quran is surprisingly specific about this, isn't it? About the idea of perfect reconstruction.
Oh, astonishingly so. It directly challenges the idea that we can't be put back together again. It says, does man think we cannot assemble his bones? Yes, we are able even to proportion his fingertips.
The fingertips, that's such a specific detail.
It's key. It means perfect, unique reconstruction down to the smallest detail. Your identity, fully restored and perfected. Prophetic teachings say the whole body is reformed from a single indestructible part, the tailbone, no matter how scattered the remains are.
So if we pull all of this together, the fact that a limb doesn't regrow isn't a sign of divine weakness.
Not at all. It's a sign of divine wisdom, of hikmah. It's a deliberate choice to create a stable, challenging world, a Dar al-Imtihan, that's necessary for our spiritual growth. The idea that he should fix it if he can is just imposing our limited human sense of purpose onto an eternal plan.
So for you, the listener, what this really means is that the challenges of this physical world, the pain and the limits, they are the rules of the test. The suffering is there to help you cultivate the patience you need for the ultimate reward.
It is. And here's the final thought for you to take away. The question isn't whether God can regenerate your arm now. The real question is why you would doubt that the one who created you from nothing the first time will fail to perfectly recreate you in the afterlife.
So the absence of regeneration now actually confirms the test.
It confirms the reality of the test, and the promise of perfect restoration later confirms his absolute power and justice. It all encourages complete trust, tawakkul, in the present, with a perfect reward waiting for you later.
The limitations aren't a bug, they're a feature of a universe designed for spiritual growth.
Thank you. That was an incredibly clarifying deep dive into a really tough question.
My pleasure. A deep dive well earned.